Hello, everybody, and welcome to a special coverage of the Premodern Super Gauntlet. I'm Michael Heup. I'm joined by none other than Michael Arnold. How's it going, Michael?
Hey, doing good. It's a good evening here. How
Yeah,
about you?
I'm doing fine. I'm excited to go over a match that I had played. So I am piloting the Terrageddon deck. I'm up against Chris Tolar with the Devourer Combo. So we're in the round of 16 for this match. So the winner gets to advance to the top 8. And I guess I'm ready to jump over just to start looking at the deck list before we go too far into the matchup or anything, unless you have anything you want to say.
Absolutely. I don't think either of these decks have ever made it to a top eight of a gauntlet
Okay.
match, which is kind of surprising considering how strong that they are. So, yeah,
It's nice to hear like
good match.
the like historian aspect, because it's like, I mean, I have paid attention to the gauntlet, but I don't have obviously as intimate of a knowledge as you, and so it's like not like I wouldn't pick up on those kind of things without like being in the weeds like you have every year. So it's pretty cool
Mhm.
to get those little tidbits of just like off the top of your head. You kind of like know which decks have performed and which ones haven't. So
Yeah.
all right. So first up, we have the deck list of the 5-color Terrageddon list. So uh, Terrageddon has kind of evolved or changed throughout the times. I guess the biggest difference is there was a pre-land tax and a post-land tax. And
Mhm.
so that's the biggest difference in terms of the Terrageddon list. And then it is a deck that I feel like has been much more customizable than a lot of archetypes. There are a lot of flex slots. I've seen lists with Nimble Mongoose and Werebears and Terravores, and then Armageddons and Cataclysms and whatnot. This one has Weathered Wayfarers and Meddling Mages and Call the Herds, which are sometimes in and sometimes out. I'm trying to think of other cards that have been in. Enlightened Tutor have been cards that's been played. Can you think of different variations that have gone in and out of style with the Terrageddon archetype?
Yeah. This is pretty mainstream for what we're looking at 2024. But yeah, there's definitely been some variety there. Patrick Burt, did very well with, I think, kind of like the earliest iterations of this variant, that we're seeing. And his was a much more aggressive, type of, Thresh-Gen deck. And that did exist like at the same time as the land tax versions. But the tax rack was the first one to really put up results. Then Patrick Burt went on and kind of he won a monthly with more aggro style with monkeys and werebears, that type of thing. Even Savannah Lions at some point. But this is kind of what we're settling on. Pretty much all the variations that we see are going to run Weathered Wayfarer. That's part of like the base. You'll see, of course, Swords to Plowshares, some number of Naturalize effects, and usually you do have some number of cycling lands with to run with the Wayfarer, some number of Sylvan Libraries. That's all pretty standard.
Yeah, I'll just highlight the card of Weathered Wayfarer, because obviously this is like where an archetype where it can do a lot of work. So I guess the exciting targets, there's 4 Wastelands, 2 Rishadan Ports. I think there's 2 Treetop Village, a couple cycling lands, and then I think a lair land, like Gemstone Mine. I don't know if Gemstone Mine is considered an exciting target for Weathered Wayfarer, but those are some of the utilities I've seen. I guess in the past, sometimes there's Kor Haven that's absent from this list. Uh, Maybe I'm wrong. No,
Yeah,
it is in
definitely a
this
good
list.
amount of
No, I do,
utility
I
that you
do.
could do with
No, I
this.
do have it. I do have it in this list. Sorry. So Core Haven, another
Mhm.
card. So having a lot of flexibility. I guess Mishra's Factory might be another one that sometimes makes its way into certain archetypes. But so a lot of flexibility in terms of maybe depending on the matchup or just how the cards in your hand, that Weathered Wayfarer can do a lot of different things and find different cards. So one that's interesting to watch out for. Is there anything else you want to say about the Terragon list?
I don't think we need to say anything more because we're recording this on the day that the Duress crew just dropped their latest hardcast talking about Terrageddon for over 3.5 hours.
Okay.
So
So
if you want to
yes,
dive deep into Terrageddon,
yeah, so the loyal
listen
listeners
to
will
the
already
hardcast.
have pretty much heard everything that needs to be said. So and
Yep.
yeah, so we'll jump over to the other deck, which is the Devourer combo, which is what I'll be facing up against. So
Hmm.
this is that kind of like, I guess if we're talking about like yesteryear, like I feel like there was in the earlier days of pre-modern, this was dare I say, a boogeyman. I mean, it's definitely like more prominent, and it's
they
kind of
about bannings.
Yeah, it's kind of faded out. I guess I mean, I still respect it as a deck. I guess I don't know if it's consistency issues or if metagame changes. From my experience, there are like a lot of sideboard cards that just will do stuff against the combo. Whether they're like a card like Engineered Plague is not something that is put in your sideboard specifically for Devourer Combo, but it interacts really well because you could name Construct and you could never put the Phyrexian Devourer in play. So cards like that, like I thought that was probably the biggest factor of kind of pushing it out of the metagame. But I'll briefly explain kind of what the deck is doing if those aren't familiar. But you're assembling an A plus B combo, and the A combo could be either Altar of Dementia or Fling, and then the B would be Phyrexian Devourer. And kind of the bridge between those two would be the card Tinker, could get either Altar or the Devourer. And so if you assemble those two, you most likely have a win. I mean, there's some corner cases where if the game goes on really long, that Altar of Dementia isn't able to mill out an opponent if you don't have enough converted mana cost in your deck. And then, unless your opponent is gaining a very significant amount of life, Fling will always get the job done. And then the rest of the deck is kind of acceleration and filtering, and then the kind of the card draw, mana rocks and whatnot. Mana rocks are nice because it can kind of accelerate you into things, and then also it's a card to tinker away. I guess Tasaba's Web is a card that's in the deck that I think that's probably been the biggest innovation from like the really old versions, just because of the metagame that card is pretty good against decks with like Rishadan Port and Wasteland. So what do you have to say about Devourer Combo? Which I'm calling it Devourer Combo. You could call it, if you want to call it, Corn Puffs. I know that's your thing. So
that is, and we all know that. I mean, a deck increases about half a tier just with the serial name. So Devourer Combo, Corn Pops. There's some sushi name for it as well that you can ask Phil Wynn about. But very, very solid deck. I think the tales of its demise are a little bit overstated. I've played this in a couple monthlies, and I've always had like a 500 record, so it's not something that you're gonna show up with and just scrub out. It's even though it is weak to some sideboard cards, like main deck, it is incredibly solid, and like your biggest interaction with this combo game one is going to be Meddling Mage. However, like I played against Chris on Devour in my first round with Patriot, which runs 4 Meddling Mage and then 8 cantrips, and he just dismantled me, pretty quickly. So the deck is probably more resilient than the other top combo decks of the format to Meddling Mage, because you have two sides of each combo. You can hardcast a Devour, you can tinker it out, and then with the kill condition, Alter Dementia, or Fling that are available to you. So there's a lot of options that you have available to be able to get it out. So against Engineer Plague and Cabal Therapy decks, it's quite resilient.
Okay. So let's jump down to our match, and we can get things going. So I am on the left with the Terrageddon list with the Mog Fanatic playmat, and I'm up against Chris with the Devourer Combo. So I have the Weathered Wayfarer highlighted, as we kind of talked about that in our pregame, as a card that definitely with the Terrageddon list can provide a lot of versatility or get a lot of targets. There's certainly a number of non-basics in terms of Ancient Tomb, City of Traders, Shivan Reef, and then I think there's the Lair Lands of Chris's that have targets. So no shortage of Wasteland targets in this matchup.
Yeah, absolutely not. The trade-off being, though, of course, that he's got a lot of mana rocks which are available. So if you actually want Chris to have a good amount of lands, rather than a very few, because if he's keeping a land light hand, that means he's got plenty of rocks, which you can't interact with.
And I guess
like when you're on a Wasteland deck, you're like, please don't have lands, please don't have lands.
Sure. The other side is like, what if you're doing the Weathered Wayfarer plan? It's usually like I don't know if spinning your wheels is quite the right way to describe it, but you're not applying a lot of pressure, and the Devourer combo is something that, like, if you're given enough time and resources to assemble things, you can really just out of nowhere just win the game. So it's kind of like maybe in this matchup, like Weathered Wayfarer, like if on a House of Cards hands where like the mana is a problem, like it could maybe take things out. But most of the time, if the game is just kind of drawing things out, I think that might actually favor the Devourer combo deck. So a mulligan from the Terrageddon list
I do believe as well. And that's one of the strengths of the deck is that Devourer can it has a very quick game plan. It can turn 2 kill, but then also has a pretty solid game plan with grinding. So I think the only other deck which does better at that in the format, a combo deck specifically, staying within the archetype, but the only one better at that is Dreadnought.
Okay.
Really. But a question I used to ask, a lot of times, especially new to the format, like, what are the top 5 combo decks of the format? And I've always had Devourer in at least the top 5. Never the the 1 or number 2. But yeah, just because of the things we've discussed, it's very redundant, resilient, at least main deck right there, fast, and with a grinding plan.
Yeah, certainly fast. Like I would say, like older versions, it had the potential of winning on turn 2. I think Jeweled Amulet was required in that, which is absent from Chris's list. So I don't know if he has the ability to win on turn 2. But even so, like the he still has the ability to win on turn 3. So it's not that far off in a lot of matchups. So Gemstone Mine is going to lead with a turn 1 Weathered Wayfarer from the Terrageddon list.
Yeah, so you can technically turn 2 here with his deck, but it requires like a perfect setup. You have to have like an Ancient Tomb plus a Mana Rock, and then you have another Soul Land, so that gives you enough mana for Tinker plus an Altar.
Okay. So we see the turn 1 from Chris is a City of Brass and a Portent. So kind of setting things up and looking to either smooth out his hand or find a missing combo piece. So.
Portent is not a very common card, which I've seen in Devourer lists. And I don't even think I've seen Tom Metelsky is one of the people who put the most work into Devourer combo. I don't even think I've seen Portent in his list at all.
Yeah, I'll say when I looked at the list that Chris had, I mean, the thing that stood out to me the most, I guess, was that there were only 3 main deck copies of Phyrexian Devourer, and that was like the biggest thing because I think every list I've seen always has 4. But I think definitely this is something that like Chris has made some adjustments to like the traditional stock list.
Yeah, I mean, I love Portent in combo decks, especially like in combo decks like Devourer, where you don't always need to win right away. Yeah, just being able to turn 1 Portent is one of the most powerful like first turns that you can have in the format.
All right, so a turn 2 Sky Diamond from Chris is one of the mana rocks that we had talked about before. So this one just makes blue mana, comes into play tapped. So I am doing the trick, as you say, is when I fetch with Windswept Heath, there's a moment where I can respond and use the Weathered Wayfarer ability. I haven't yet found the land, and I currently have 1 land in play, so I'm able to activate the Weathered Wayfarer. So.
Yep. We don't get to land tax anymore, but at least we get to Wayfarer.
Yeah, so a little bit of awkwardness in terms of I'm finding Wasteland 1, like if if I'm destroying a land, like he's already has a mana rock, so we're already behind in that aspect in terms of still would be at 2 mana. So, but it might be a route that I need to choose. I mean, because the Terrageddon deck does have 3s and 4s that it wants to play Call the Herd, Terrageddons, Terravores, and Armageddons. So.
I think if you have Wasteland plus anything else in your hand, you're in a fairly decent spot. The only kind of delayed thing with like a Meddling Mage. You don't have the mana, particularly for that, but you would have gotten the planes anyway if you would have like Wasteland plus Meddling Mage. I think that would have been a very strong turn. And you do Wasteland plus Sylvan Library. That's pretty decent. So he doesn't have the mana to be able to pull off next turn. So you definitely got to get an activation out of it. Hopefully get some value. Find a Naturalize to take care of that Sky Diamond or an altar, which might hit play. So
Yeah, so I put a Sylvan Library into play, and I use up the last counter of the Gemstone Mine. So if Chris is going to put another land into play, which likely he will have to, that means I guess my Weathered Wayfarer is not turned on because I don't have a white source. I just have the green,
right.
So I need to find it. Mox Diamond is a potential, but otherwise, if I have it from a land, then I guess my Weathered Wayfarer is not online. But so Chris has a Gemstone Mine of his own, and then he'll add a Mind Stone. So.
I'd assume if you fetched the forest that you would have had like a lot more green plays available within your hand, because you could have gotten any any mana you wanted off the Gemstone Mine there. But that's one of the things that they were talking about, like on the hardcast, was just about like sequencing and kind of just making sure that you have in mind like what your game plan is going to be over like the next couple turns based off this, because those decisions definitely snowball, and you can cut yourself off from possible plays if you're not sequencing correctly. And if you are sequencing correctly, you can definitely leverage the power of your deck.
Yeah, so I paid 8 life for the Sylvan Library to draw 2 extra cards. And then
it's just Necropotence.
Yeah, this is a type of matchup where like the difference of your life total is there, but like it's either like it's kind of like it's very binary. It's either 20 or 0 almost. Like I mean, there are very few corner cases when like a Fire Extinguisher comes into play and attacks the natural way. So usually it's just Fling or Alter Dementia. So. All right. Weathered Wayfarer attacking is probably not the best sign for me that I'm not activating it or at least even threatening the idea. So
okay.
Yeah, if I think are we still I pass a turn, end of turn impulse for Chris. So I'm after the Sylvan Library extra cards. I still don't even have an extra mana source. So.
Yeah, which is interesting looking at those 3 cards. There's a lot of mana within the deck, so. But just going back to that sequencing thing there, if you'd fetched a plains off of the Windswept Heath, you would have been able to have the activation there.
Yeah, I do remember there is a Terravore in my hand, and I think that was part of the reasoning that influence of why I fetched the forest at that spot, though in this exact situation that if it were plains, then I think it just would have been better. And also, I knew I had the Sylvan Library in my hand, and not that it's a guarantee, but I'm like, all right, I get to see 3 cards. It is very likely that I will see a white source in that spot, and it was just not there. There were, I think it was just three non-land cards. So.
And here we see City of Traders into an altar. So. Does Chris have it? He's tapping for a blue, but it's just a Chromatic Sphere, so.
Yeah, a little bit of relief for me that I get a little bit more time. So. I will take my turn and look at the top 3 cards with Sylvan Library. Again, it's pretty free to take all 3 cards. I mean, it hurts a little bit to go down to 3 life, but there's not.
Yeah.
There's no interactive spells. It's not like there's Fire, Ice, or Bolts or anything in Chris's list. So.
Absolutely. Yeah, the only kind of question is if you want to grab those 3 cards right now, or if you want to just like maybe grab 1 extra, shuffle with a Sylvan, something like that, and grab the the extra card on another turn. That's really just the decision there. But yeah, I totally agree with you. It's in this matchup, 1 life is about as much as 0. Or excuse me, 1 life is about as much as 20.
Sure.
I should say.
There's a few corner cases where I'm trying to think like I guess fetch lands or whatever, but like yeah, it's pretty much the same. So all right, it looks like I take 1 extra card in that situation. So
Yeah, that's totally justifiable, like, especially if it's like just a dead card at that point.
all right,
But
yeah, Yamamoko's second
yeah,
Sylvan Library is definitely not the follow up to me taking a turn off. So my hand is not great. So
ooh, but yeah, Chris just shows an intuition there.
mhm.
And with you tapped out, I do not believe that you have any free spell in your deck that you can interact with.
Yeah,
Um,
but I'll do my trademark thing and make my opponent play it out. So
yeah.
I know you were just talking about this the other night. It's is that I'm one to not concede very often. So
Yep.
so I'm counting out my deck. I'm anticipating the Tinker for the Devourer. I guess I'll give a little preview here. He's gonna find Devourer, and I'm still gonna make him go through it. When I looked at the deck list, the converted mana cost of the total deck is actually lower than normal, and I think it's because of the absence of Factor Fiction. And so I'm like, all right,
Also, yeah.
I just make me show that you didn't just draw a few Devourers, because then it's actually like way closer than it's. And I've seen it in the past that people have like tried to combo off, and then they start going through the motions and they realize that they don't have enough cards in their deck to reach that converted mana cost. So I don't know.
Yeah, you did mention before he's only running 3 Devours,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, you want to be able to have um, that big boost from the 6 casting cost with the Devourer.
Yeah, for those that's not familiar, the Phyrexian Devourer is in play, and it has the clause of when it has, I don't even know if it's 6 or 7 or more power. There's
7 or
a
more.
trigger that goes on the stack, but you're able to respond to that again and build its power at least temporarily. And so to the point where the power is enough, and before that sacrifice trigger is, you can use the Altar Dementia or Fling, and then defeat your opponent.
Hmm. Yeah, so the official rulings, I believe, are that, yeah, it's called a static trigger.
Okay.
And so once it's on the stack once, it's not going to trigger again until the first one's resolved.
Okay.
And so because it's just remaining on the stack there, you have the ability to respond, keep growing it. And with that sacrifice trigger on the stack, you get to then kill your opponent.
All right. So no Gaia's Blessing in my deck list, and so that means that the Altar of Dementia will result in a win for the Devourer deck. So let's take a look at our sideboards. So let's first take a look, I think, at the Terrageddon list. So just running through the sideboard real quick: 2 Zern Orb, 2 Thornscape Apprentice, Pyroblast, Tormod's Crypt, Red Elemental Blast, Aura of Silence, 2 Xantid Swarm, 2 Rave Revelation, Fiery Justice, Devout Witness, and Fiery Covenant. So the cards that catch my eye, the blasts are relevant. There's blue cards,
Absolutely.
not a ton of blue cards, but the ones that are there, like Tinker is a very critical card. So also like an Intuition is another one that is a fine target. Aura of Silence seems great. There's a ton of artifacts to the taxing effect would be good, and also the ability to blow up an Altar of Dementia in response to a Tinker is good. Though obviously the opponent, if the opponent is making that play, like clearly they can predict that that's going to happen, but still a card that's very fine. And then Xantid Swarm, I guess I don't know if there's that many counter spells in the 75 for the list. And then Devout Witness is a disenchant on the stick. So I would put the blasts, Aura Silence, and Devout Witness at the top of the cards that I'm looking at. Is there anything else that catches your eye?
The only thing that catches my eye is the entire lack of things like Engineer Plague, Null Rod, and Curse Totem, which we kind of alluded to earlier, which are those sideboard cards which
Hmm.
are brought in for a variety of decks, which just so happen to splash damage Devour, but you have really nothing of the sort outside of Aura Silence. Um, and yeah, it's just a matter of being able to make sure that you have the sideboard cards that you have are available
Are
in
there any like
in
really
your draws.
weak cards that are just clearly not good enough that are like I'm pretty excited to sideboard out?
Yeah, Source of Plowshares, that's
Okay.
your biggest one right there. It is notably pretty terrible
Hmm.
against the Devourer combo because they can just win in response. And, the fling and altar, all the sacrificing is part of the cost. So you really never have a profitable time to be able to remove the Devourer. So those go out first thing.
Okay.
Armageddon also pretty lackluster.
All right. Let's take a look at the sideboard for the Devourer list. So 3 Sanded Swarm, a Pyroblast, 4 Pyroclasm, 3 Rushing River, Defense Grid, 2 Red Elemental Blast, and a Hoodwink. So
Hmm.
kind of have an anti counter plan with Xanted Swarm and Defense Grid, and I guess the blasts in some way. Anti creature plan with Pyroclasm. There's the full 4 copies, and then 3 Rushing River is kind of the catch all. That's pretty standard in the Devourer sideboard. Which
Hmm.
I guess how do you prioritize? Like this is I think like it's much more difficult I think to figure out like the balance of all there's a lot more cards that have some amount of value I think from the sideboard for Chris. It's just difficult because I don't think you want to bring all these cards. Like Pyroclasm is a card that seems decent. Like it gets rid of Meddling Mage and Weathered Wayfarer, but it doesn't do very much against Terravore. And it's interesting how many of those you bring in. And Weathered or Rushing River is always a card that like it kind of does that same thing of temporarily getting rid of a Meddling Mage just might be enough, and then also has the ability to maybe bounce a Terravore to buy you time. And then I guess that's probably what I prioritize. I guess nothing else really makes sense.
Yeah. So if I'm in Chris's shoes, I'm not being too fancy about it. I'd bring in like one Pyroblast, one Red Elemental Blast, um, like a Pyroclasm, and like a Rushing River, and that's pretty much it. I cut the defense grids because they're not really important in the matchup, and you could shave a couple spots, from here or there. Cut an impulse, that's always justifiable. Yeah, and just kind of trim whatever you feel like, but don't overdo it. The really only thing you want to avoid is like double meddling mage, because that's really bad for Chris. But other than that, um, I think that Devour is in a pretty powerful spot right here. This is why people were talking about bans for the deck when it first emerged in like 2018, 2019, is because if you don't have those powerful sideboard cards, it's very powerful.
So the blast that you mentioned, I like really the only relevant target is Meddling Mage, right?
Yep,
Okay.
that's all you need it for.
Okay.
So just bring in a couple of those. Make sure that you have an easy answer to Meddling Mage, that you can find it when you need it, but diversify so they don't like. Again, you want to avoid just losing to double Meddling Mage. That's it.
Okay. All right. We'll jump back down as we are shuffling up. I believe we've finished sideboarding. There might be, I might go back to the sideboard. There's definitely been times where I'm like shuffling up and then I'm still thinking about all the cards that I brought in, and I'm like, now that I think about it, I want to make one more adjustment. So
Mhm. I will note to the viewers that you were a lover of Terravore before it was cool. I remember you gave
yes,
a challenge to myself, Flint, and Flint Espel and Ryan Grodzinski back in 2021. I want to say, and yeah, we all had to build the deck with Terravore for I think the Fall Brawl, something like that.
yeah, it's kind of funny how like then it was like cool, and now it like if someone's be like you have to build a deck with Terravore, you have like multiple very
Yeah,
reasonable options, and like no one would bat an eye at you playing Terravore in your Terrageddon list or your Red Green Oath lists, uh, or I guess you could even say like the I've seen it in the Sutured Ghoul lists because its power
yeah.
and toughness is still counted when it's in the graveyard now. So yeah, there's a lot of ways that are very respectable ways of people playing Terravore in the current metagame. So
Hmm.
What was your Terravore list in that challenge?
So I played Legion Landloss,
Okay.
or Mono Green Ponza, whatever you want to say. I did splash red though for Earthquake,
Okay.
because we were kind of in the middle of Elves Height of Power, so I wanted to be able to have a good sideboard card um, for the Elf matchup, and I did beat it when I played against it.
All right. So I get to start things off. I lead with a Rishadan Port, which is kind of an awkward lead.
Yep.
Uh, I'm trying to think what exactly was in my hand, but I mean, uh, it certainly doesn't seem like a strong a strong open. Just a colorless mana, and then I guess I have the potential. It certainly looks much more embarrassing against like someone that plays Ancient Tomb and a Mana Rock. So,
Hmm.
but I'll port on the upkeep of Chris's second turn, and he'll add a Shivan Reef, so he'll be able to play Chromatic Sphere.
One thing I do want to bring up, because like pre-modern is that format where you get to play with a lot of powerful cards that you're not allowed to in other formats, just because the constraints with the smaller card pool. And if you like casting Tinker, then Devour is like the deck for you.
Sure.
It's definitely gives you that feeling of just power that you can explode out of nowhere.
Yeah, I'll
And
say if anyone comes to pre-modern after like playing a bunch of vintage cube and they're like, "All right, I am signing up to play a Tinker deck," you're probably going to be disappointed in a lot of ways because the Tinker is much more of a fair card than what it is in like a current modern aspect. So on my third turn, I add a Wasteland. I don't use the Wasteland for its ability. I tap it for mana to play a Call the Herd, and then it looks like Chris is going to spend his next turn sifting through with the Chromatic Sphere. He's going to make blue mana, and then he's going to tinker away the Sky Diamond for a Devourer. And if this is a fling, then yeah,
yeah,
there's not a lot I can do here. And I'll plop down a hand of Weathered Wayfarer, Terravore, Meddling Mage, and Armageddon. So a pretty clunky hand. I guess I want to say I'm mulligan because if I look at all these cards in retrospect, like none of those line up very well at all. Um, but yeah, I
you
certainly
must have, because I'm only counting 8 cards
okay.
on the table right there, and that was your turn 3,
Yeah.
so that would have been like a multi 5,
Hmm. Okay.
wait or so that was your turn 3. There's 8 cards.
I think this is what I'm showing is my 6 card hand right here, but maybe it was 5. I don't know. Either way, like I know um, I felt like in this matchup that my draws were below average. I'm not saying it's like a matchup that is a slam dunk for Terrageddon, but it definitely feels like Meddling Mage is a card that can pull a lot of weight, and that never came into play. And even then, like with the backup plan of just kind of whether disrupting with Weathered Wayfarer or maybe even an Armageddon, that never came into play. Well, I will give credit to the Devourer deck. Like obviously with the mana rocks of Mind Stone and Sky Diamond, Armageddon can be minimized in terms of its efficiency, but it definitely felt like my draws were clunky. And then I think a lot of it we talk about game one in terms of me fetching for that forest there. I think was really punishing. Again, we kind of talked about it briefly, but I had looked at the Terravore in my hand, and I don't even think even if I get a plains in that spot, like I don't think it makes it harder to cast the Terravore from that spot. It
Yeah, it makes your
just
Sylvan better because
yep,
you at least like guaranteed a couple activations with
yeah,
Wayfarer. So that certainly would have helped. Um, However, it also might have been just delaying the inevitable.
mhm.
Um, I think this is a pretty good display for what Devour is good at, and why you might want to consider it as a deck when you're, consider like just looking for an event, maybe something different to play, or you're just looking to attack from a different angle, something that's a little bit unexpected, because it hasn't been played very recently for 2-3 years maybe. But it's something that can still take down some heavyweights of the format because it is very consistent. You've got that nice you can play up to 8 pieces of your A plus B combo with the Tinkers and everything like that. So it's still structurally a very solid deck. It's just a matter of how much splash damage that there's going around in the format. And with most people kind of focusing in on Parallax Tide and Dreadnought and that type of thing, the answers to or replenish. Devourer, again, gets hit by some big sideboard cards, but it doesn't care about Tormod's Crypt. It doesn't care very much about Disenchant. That's not the way that you attack the deck. So it's certainly something that you should keep on your radar, maybe in the back of your mind. And especially if you like to play Tinker, it's something to consider.
Yeah, certainly super powerful. And yeah, if a metagame is not prepared for Devourer, then it certainly can take advantage of things. So yeah, so we see the Devourer deck in the hands of Chris Tolar advancing to the top 8. So well done to him. And I fall. I lose my Terrageddon deck, and so I guess at this point, we know the top 8. Is that correct?
Yes, we know the top 8, and if this is the second video that you're going to be releasing from our recordings, we could go over that really quickly, and I can even let people know what our standings are like going into the top 8.
Sure.
Let me pull up my bracket really quick. I'll update that match. But for all you viewers, we have in the top 8 right now White Weenie, Wug Threshold. That will be the match, White Weenie versus Wug Threshold. Then we have Draco Blast taking on Junk Zoo. We have Devourer against Elves, and I'm going to update that one right now, so give me 1 second. All right, and then the last match is Grotog against Replenish. So that is our top 8. And after I just update that.
So real quick, I guess what is your, I guess, either deck that you're most surprised to see in the top 8, and then which deck that you're most excited to see play in the top 8, or that you're cheering for to win? Maybe that's the same deck.
I would say that Wug Threshold is probably the most surprising that I've seen there. It's definitely not a very established archetype, and Jay took a very unorthodox list from an even more unorthodox list, I should say, out of an unorthodox archetype. I actually had to ask him to revise it to include blue.
I say it's much more of a woog. The emphasis on the W and the G. Not that there's anything wrong with it, but there are not a lot of blue cards in the 75. So
yeah, as far as decks that I'd like to be able to see take it down, I would be thrilled to see Devourer take it down, because I've always had a lot of respect for that deck. And yeah, it's just been disregarded for a while. And same thing with Draco Blast. Draco Blast is in the top 8 here. I just played it for the January monthly. It felt really good. And I beat Rich on Replenish with it. So it certainly has some tools. And looking at this top 8 here, Draco Blast definitely, depending on how the matchups go, could definitely run away with it, I think.
Okay. I'll give my 2 cents, I guess. So of decks that I'm most surprised, I would say White Weenie. It's one of those decks that I've always looked at in terms of when I'm designing a deck. I'm like, yeah, this seems like a lot of the pieces are there. This should be fine. And then there's just something missing, I feel like. And so props to is Gabe piloting the White Weenie deck?
Yep. So it'll be Gabe on White Weenie versus Jay on Wug Threshold.
Okay. So props to Gabe for getting the White Weenie list to the top 8, because it's just something that I've never even got it past to just an idea. I've never put it to paper to play it, because I just didn't have faith in the ability of it. So Awesome that it's doing well. And I mean, my biased, rooting is I'm going to say I want Junksu to take it down. That's the deck that I have in the top 8. So also something that's near and dear to my heart that I've toyed with and tinkered with, and I think, well, I'll say is underrepresented. That's because I haven't really seen anyone else play it. There was a phase where I felt I saw a few people play it in some small events, but a deck that I think is serviceable. I'll say, I guess I'm not trying to say that it is the best deck by any means, but I think it is very solid and reasonable. So that's my hope is that I can take it down with the Junksu list. So.
And yeah, as far as our predictions ranking goes, so we do have Lionel Lau pulls ahead of Flippy. Lionel has 35 points. Flippy has 34. Pulling in behind them is David Raxa with 33 points. Andrew Levine, David Palmer, and Gary Roth are then all tied with 32. And finishing up the page 1, we have Andrew Webb and S.N. Foster on 31 points. And then we have Jay Lansall and Robin Lund both at 30 points.
Okay. All right. So thank you, Michael, for joining me in the booth, and also just for running this event. I mean, I think a lot of anyone who's watching this is probably very thankful for your dedication for putting this together. Me kind of being in the trenches, I understand all the work in terms of organizing and just kind of maybe pushing people along to play the matches. That's definitely that's targeted at me. I think I am the one who has been holding people up the most, so apologies for everyone. But yeah, so it's been a blast, and I look forward to seeing how the top 8 pulls through, and that we can crown a champion, not only just for the winner of the gauntlet, but then also the prediction is always fun for someone to win that sweet altered card that you hand out. So. All right, I'll give the floor to you if you want to say anything before we take off.
That's it. We're going to start the top 8 pretty soon, and that should go relatively quickly, and we'll have our winner here within the next week or so.
All right, awesome.
I'd say.
All right, thanks everyone for tuning in, but until next time, take care.